Hey Penny, it's great to see you again, and thank you for doing this virtual Q&A for Oak Cliff. And I guess thank you also for giving one of your vital organs to a stranger. Um,
You're welcome.
the first question that sort of occurs to me is, did you ever before suspect that there was a portion of your brain that was a little enlarged, or was this a revelation thing?
Well, it's funny, my biggest fear has always been like being mediocre in some way. And so yeah, I'm very pleased to discover that my brain is unusual, but maybe it's not that much of a surprise.
Um, One of the things that I really enjoyed about your film is its willingness to sort of dwell in subtlety and nuance and ambiguity about this question, and the place you settle of it sort of being a my body, my choice proposition was really resonated for me. I'm curious in where you are in your journey of taking this film around, and what else you may have learned from other people as you show the film other places.
Yeah, I think you don't really know what your film is until it's out in the world, kind of acting in communication with other people. And so never is that more true than a film like this, where it's so personal. I mean, like my difficulty making the film, which was having no distance between subject and maker, was pretty vast. And it's similar in the release, in the sense that, I sort of just watch it and it feels just completely surreal, and I can't fathom what other people are making of it, or like that character that people are watching for an hour and 45 minutes. So I would just say it's been interesting to kind of have the finality of audience reactions. And one thing that's been really interesting is to talk to people about different things that they've experienced in their own lives that they relate this to. So, for example, I've talked to several people who have been surrogates, and I've talked to several people who have been egg or sperm donors. And so there's a lot of similar things out there, so it's been really gratifying to realize that it's not, because I didn't ultimately make a film about kidney disease. It's really very little about kidney disease, and an awful lot about what it means to be a good person, and what it means to make a sacrifice for the good of a distant stranger that you'll never meet, and why is that hard, and why is that challenging in all kinds of ways. So I think everyone can relate to that, and so it's just been nice to talk to people and have that suspicion be I guess confirmed.
Yeah. What about I imagine, since you're on camera for so much of the film, that a
Yeah,
lot of
way more than I wanted to be, Eric.
that was another takeaway. I get that, and that makes it all, we're all the more grateful that you're here appearing on camera again talking about it. But so much of the shaping of the story must have been in the edit and the collaboration between you and your editor. And I'm wondering if you could be specific about what those conversations were like, and if there were any personal essay documentaries that the two of you shared as points of reference, or anything along those lines.
Yeah. So I would say it's funny, because in some very obvious ways, it's my most personal film. But what that actually means in practical terms is it was my most collaborative film. And I really tried to show that in different ways throughout the film, even with just giving a little bit more behind the scenes action of my crew and how important they were to me in the whole process, and just trying to acknowledge how many other people went into shaping the film, even more than usual. And so with my editor, yeah, you're totally right. Everything came together in the edit. There were many iterations of this film over 4 years. And I would just say that for that process, I really just had to rely on my collaborators to help me understand the nature of the character that we were crafting. I think that was the biggest challenge. I am just so mortified by everything I say and do, as most people are, frankly, when they see themselves on film. And I'm no different, I'm not good point, Penny, funny joke. That's never my reaction to anything. But, to have, so I had to really trust, especially my editor, Hannah, that she was shaping this character in a way that would be charming, and that it would be someone you'd want to spend an hour and a half with, and so it was really challenging. So Hannah had worked on a number of personal films, and that was part of the reason I sought her out for this project. She worked on Cecilia Alderando's film, and also a film called Vision Portraits, which is by, these are all films where and also The Proposal by Jill Magid. So these are all films where the filmmaker is also the main character, and they were all handled like so artfully and so intelligently and with such, it can just turn so lame so quick. And then on another level, like we really looked to the films of Kirsten Johnson as a reference point as well, especially Dick Johnson Is Dead, and just trying to like find that balance between sort of zaniness and humor and always leaning into that and leaning into what makes us like uncomfortable, but also like having fun, which is my goal when I make films, is to have fun and to like lean into what makes me uncomfortable. So those were some of the things that came up along the way.
One thing we do in the Oak Cliff program guide is do a recommended if you like feature. And I think I mentioned Dick Johnson Is Dead as one of those
good
films. So it's validating here that was
okay, good. Yeah, it's really one of the only films that I thought about.
Yeah.
Like there really weren't many models for this film, particularly the humor. I mean, there were a lot of like very serious personal films out there, and then there are some that are like kind of funny, but they're not that deep. We were really trying to like do both, sort of existential big questions of life and death, but also just like having a laugh, whenever we could.
Yeah. One thing I was also just personally curious about, having known your previous work, was I know you shot this over a long period. Like, where did the filming of this coincide, even particularly with the last film of yours I saw, the Kenny G documentary? Like, are you recovering from a surgery while, he's doing mad soprano sax solos?
Yeah, it did overlap, like for sure. Yeah. We were in production on the Kenny G film, like throughout the process of making this film as well.
What's it like toggling between those two subjects?
It was great, honestly, because, like, I always like to have more than one project, frankly, at a time, because, you hit a wall with one, and it's just nice to be able to like put it aside for a week and just work on a different project for a while. So it was fun. I mean, also Kenny, who's like such a wonderful person, was so sweet and lovely. And he sent me flowers when I was recovering and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, not only in your documentary, but also in the documentary Wheatl's Groove about the Seattle.
You've seen that? Wow.
Yeah.
Deep cut.
I mean, one of my big takeaways from that was, Kenny's actually, he didn't have to show up and be so sweet in that documentary. I give him points for that.
Yeah.
But maybe on a more serious and darker note, one thing that, might be on people's minds as they see this film or as they see it in the program guide is the recent sort of weaponization of the term Good Samaritan.
Yeah, I know, just quite recently.
Yeah, and your film does such an elegant job of zooming in on, the actual intended definition, which is not that there's this place, Samaria, where everyone who comes from it is good, but the point that it's a person from a different culture giving selflessly to another person just for the sake of doing it. And all of a sudden in the news, there's headlines where all of a sudden they'd like Good Samaritan to mean someone who murders someone who's different than them. So yeah. I don't know if there's a question in there, but your thoughts.
Well, my thoughts are that there was a scene in the film, this film, like there was like a 4-hour version of the film. Like it's still too long. Like, but there's in my defense, like way too many things to get into here, and there used to be a scene in the film about what's called Good Samaritan laws, because, there's this kind of quite specific issue, right? And like leaving aside like recent current events that like I'm not going to weigh in on, but there are like situations in the law where you have to deal with the fact that sometimes someone's trying to do something good and actually does something terrible. Like if you try to rescue someone by giving them CPR and you accidentally murder them in the process, like these are things that happen. And so just to kind of step back and be more broad about it, the idea of being a good Samaritan doesn't always lead to like good outcomes. And so I was trying to sort of tease that apart as well, and to make it more personal, I was quite concerned that in my desire to help this anonymous stranger, that I wouldn't inadvertently do harm to them or to anyone else in the process. And that was something I took really seriously and thought a lot about. And part of why I wanted my donation to be anonymous was to avoid any inadvertent emotional, psychological harm or trauma or, difficulty for this person. I just wanted them to receive the gift and receive it anonymously and not have to figure out an appropriate Christmas present for me. Like that seemed like a little bit too much to ask of someone who's already in quite significant, health straits.
Sure. I was also curious now, you've made films about Richard Nixon and about Satanists and Kenny G, and each one also, finds its own style that is particular to the subject matter. But I'm wondering, as you step back and see a body of work developing, other than the fact that they're all made by Penny Lane filmmaker, do you see any unifying thread between all these disparate projects?
I think so. Yeah. And, on the style front, it's just quite clear that I'm not aiming for formal mastery of some sort. There are artists who really kind of sort of try to do the same thing again and again and get just better and better and master that thing. And maybe I'll end up doing that eventually over the course of 40 films, but definitely these first 6 features, that's not what I've been doing. It's oh, let's try animation. Oh, let's try that, and right now as we speak, I'm in the midst of doing a purely observational film, which I've never done before. So I'm really trying to just always stretch and try new things. And that's very exciting for me. But to answer your question, I think that, I actually think that there's this search, and you realize it over time because, you think as a young artist, well, everyone has the same approach in a way, you don't sort of understand what's unique about you. It takes time, and now I look back and I just see that there's this kind of constant search for surprise and upending expectations and kind of again, looking for that, there's a little bit of a troll inside of me that I'm just kind of ooh, what's making me uncomfortable? Let's poke at that, and that kind of comes through to the audience as well, kind of asking people to reconsider their expectations of what a person is or a topic is, or even what a film on that person or topic might be. I made a music documentary where the first experts come out and just trash that musician for 4 minutes. That's not what you expect from a music documentary, right? And I'm trying to surprise myself, and I'm easily bored by documentaries. I find most of them very boring. And so I just am really have a pretty high expectation for what that surprise factor has to be for me to feel like I've done something worthwhile.
Well, I want to congratulate you on this film. You definitely bring many surprises along the way, and goal.
I hope so.
Thanks again, Penny. Wonderful film, and we really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone who stayed for the Q&A. I appreciate it.